Hey there folks, I'm Mark in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. You know, I should just give up on making these sort of predictions one of these days. Here I would go thinking that we wouldn't get much of an impact this week, that things might even slow down, some of even based off the evidence that the last time Drake reissued a project, that being so far gone, it didn't hit the Hot 100 that strongly. And yet apparently just enough time has passed to get a sizable compliment in order to hit the Hot 100, along with a bunch of assorted pop country, because Billboard wants to make my life difficult right before I go on vacation. That's the reason why this might be late, so go figure. Hell, the only place that seems mostly static as of now is the top 10, where for yet another week, and really just solidifying its grip on the record, Old Town Road by Lil Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus holds the number one. Although those cracks are really starting to widen right now, as it lost the top spot in on-demand streaming, radio's in free fall, and that sales and YouTube advantage is shrinking every single week. But still, I'm not sure that Bad Guy by Billie Eilish has enough to get there at number 2. Even with robust radio, its drop-offs in sales and streaming don't speak to being able to make that move. Again, I keep thinking it's going to be Señorita by Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello at number 3. The streaming is consistent, the radio growth is still robust, and while the sales have slipped a bit, I can still see the potential. Hell, either be that or Truth Hurts by Lizzo at number 4, which still has strong sales, good streaming, and even more radio traction. Then we have Talk by Khalid at number 5, which hit a hard radio peak, but it's got so many spins in that format that it'll probably take a while for it to fall off properly, even despite mediocre streaming and lousy sales. Honestly, as much as I don't want to admit it, I can see it being overtaken by No Guidance by Chris Brown featuring Drake, which is at number 6 right now and might have hit a radio blockage with limited sales, but the streaming and especially the YouTube is really holding its own. Then we have I Don't Care by Ed Sheeran and Justin Bieber at number 7, which just had a terrible week on sales as the radio's really been wavering, which takes us to a new arrival and a debut in the top 10 that I'm honestly a little bit surprised to see here, Boyfriend by Ariana Grande and Social House at number 8. Now, as usual, I'll be talking about the song much more later on in the show, but huge YouTube, even bigger sales, and a real radio push has proven that Ariana can drag someone to success along with her, and that her early oversaturation of 2019 might be sticking around for a little bit. Not sure how I feel about that. Hell, it blew right past Goodbyes by Post Malone featuring Young Thug at number 9, where the streaming is slipping even as the radio keeps gaining, and Ransom by Lil Tecca holding at number 10. What can I say? If it takes the top on-demand streaming spot from Old Town Road and keeps that YouTube momentum, I guess it's just going to continue to sticking around and proving me wrong. And on that subject are losers and dropouts. And we had a lot happening this week, including some significant exits. Sure, I'm not going to complain that Cool by the Jonas Brothers or Nightmare by Halsey are gone, or even that Calma by Pedro Capo and Farruko left too, but the big stories are that both High Hopes by Panic at the Disco and Sicko Mode by Travis Scott have made their exits, in the latter case notching a full year on the Hot 100. Hell, the only exit I'm somewhat disappointed with is Cross Me by Ed Sheeran featuring PNB Rock and Chance the Rapper. What can I say? Kinda grew on me. And in all due fairness, when we go to our losers, both Ed Sheeran and Chance the Rapper took some losses. The former were Travis Scott with Antisocial down at 88, and the latter with Made in TYO and DaBaby on Hot Shower to 80. Beyond that, it's kind of all over the place, to be honest. Otro Trego by Sek featuring Darrell lost hard off its big remix gain to 44. Time by NF lost off its return to 79. Rodeo by Lil Nas X and Cardi B continues to collapse down to 96. Before I Let Go by Beyonce continues its steady decline at 100. And Single Again by Big Sean makes the expected dip off the debut to 84. Although I'll be fascinated to see if that fledgling radio really gets going for it. Now, the only one I really expect to maybe rebound is Gold Roses by Rick Ross featuring Drake down at 73. And that's conditional on Rick Ross maybe getting an album bomb next week, which looking at his streaming numbers might not be likely at all, but who knows. Now on the flip side, looking at our gains and our returns, alright, let me get this out of the way right now. The good piece, I am so happy that Khalid is pushing right back as the new single up at 81. It's one of the best songs on the sophomore album, absolutely the right choice. But that's really more than I can say about all of our gains this week, all in country and all punching significantly below their artist potential. I mean, come come on. Tip of My Tongue by Kenny Chesney to 86. Living by Dierks Bentley to 72. All to Myself by Dan and Shay still rising to 33. I mean, I get that mainstream country had a robust week here, but come on, all these artists can do better. And we might as well stay in some of that territory because we have a lot of new arrivals and nothing quite qualified for the album bomb. So, let's get started with number 99, Prayed for You by Matt Stell. Couldn't see your face, but I prayed for you. You know, at this point, I have to wonder who at Nashville Radio has been successfully bribed to block indie country talent from bulldozing in and bringing some real talent and great songs to the radio instead of yet another utterly forgettable pop country dullard that'll have at most 3 songs that chart before being forgotten. Hell, in this case, the song was dropped in March of 2018. It's only now getting played here. And make no mistake, this will be forgotten in record time. Lead-in percussion, guitars, and a fake hand clap layered to clip the front of the mix, and an underwhelming lead where he didn't know this girl from anyone, but he prayed and she showed up. And while I could easily get on my soapbox here and say how I always really hate the conflation of this sort of boringly placid religious iconography with love songs, see all the plentiful words I had for I Won't Give Up by Jason Mraz a couple weeks back on my main channel, but the truth is that this is way too undercooked to care about one way or the other, and it's not going to stick around. Next, number 97, What Happens in a Small Town by Brantley, Gilbert, and Lindsay L. So you don't need to tell me that I'm a little bit delusional for hoping that Brantley Gilbert's career crashed and burned 5 years ago after he put out Bottoms Up. But it still kind of throws me that years after Bro Country was supposed to die, he's still notching entries on the Hot 100. Last time he got here courtesy of Five Finger Death Punch. So I will say that Lindsay L is kind of a net improvement in terms of talent, along with jacking chunks of Journey's Faithfully for the lead melody. But Brantley Gilbert is no Steve Perry, and yet he's layered louder than Lindsay L in order to compete with the overbearing guitar line that has zero subtlety, and somehow they still managed to cram in a drum machine for good measure. In other words, the cheapest possible way to update this sort of song along with no sort of potent groove, which takes us to the content, which in continuing with the recycling, it's such a blatant retread of the dynamic that Chris Young and Cassidy Pope did better on Think of You 4 years ago by ways of Sam Hunt's Breakup in a Small Town, except somehow more generic. In other words, if Brantley Gilbert's expecting this to be the big comeback single for that album that I really don't want to cover that's coming out later this year, he might be in for a rough time ahead, because this is really not good. Number 95, Days in the East by Drake. Forgetting who I was on the other side, I'll be honest, I was really hoping to classify all these loose entries from Drake on Care Package as an album bomb, but he just came up short, so I'm covering all of them, and let's go through these pretty quickly. Now, this song was released as a Lucy back in 2014 with a very blatant co-writing credit from Party Next Door and a bare bones, spacey knock with some weirdly cheap jingling percussion against the hi-hats, at least until the mix sinks into the murk. And yeah, this song was probably one that could have stayed buried. Basically, it's a tune where Drake bitches out a girl for causing drama when they're both plainly cheating, so a bit of a hypocrite there. And the final verse is an extended meandering place where he will moodily contemplate his devotion that she still has for him. Now, I mean, the one thing that I will give Drake some credit for is the evolution of his rapping. He wouldn't nearly duplicate as many rhymes over and over again in 2019 as he did back in 2014, but that's slim consolation for a song that's comfortably over 5 minutes and has momentum for pretty much none of it. Yeah, not terrible, but certainly not good either. Let's move on. Number 94, Love You Too Late by Cole Swindell. Wide open, couldn't make her stay. I was wondering when we get another single from Cole Swindell off that album that dropped last summer, and yet like Dierks Bentley, I'm kind of exasperated that he missed the obvious winners like Somebody's Been Drinking, or maybe even the deep cut Dad's Old Number after the winner that was Breakup in the End for a much lesser song. Now, let me make this clear, Love You Too Late is far from the worst song on all of it, and the flaws here are relatively minor. I think the guitars are a little bit overproduced and oversold for this sort of frustrated melancholy, and don't quite capture capture the darker, deeper tone that they could really use, but the hook is remarkably punchy, the groove is actually surprisingly strong in the low end, and the regret kinda works. He didn't show his affection for this relationship, she cut loose, he very plainly blew it. That's a solid sentiment that's pretty well executed, and if we're gonna deal with this sort of mainstream country, I'll stick with stuff that's actually generally really good, like this. But now on to something that we will pretty much never see. Number 93, Fear Inoculum by Tool. So there is a much larger, much longer conversation about Tool that I will speak on at length when that album actually drops. It's a messy, complicated conversation and one that I'm fairly certain will please nobody, just warning you now. But I will say that I am pleasantly surprised to see Tool's big new single rack up some huge sales and land on the Hot 100, breaking the record for the longest ever song to chart on the Hot 100. Of course, that means that Tool is going to take their sweet damn time building off the oscillating warp of the guitar layers and the plucky bass and some of the stutters before the down-tuned groove begins letting a little bit more distortion and jangling smolder slip in. Pretty much exactly the sort of more meditative vibe that kind of makes sense for a song that's all about absorbing those darker elements and emotions to protect yourself from deeper toxicity in a deceiving figure that has been beaten years ago and can yet no longer hurt him. And yet, if I'm being honest, well, I dig the atmospherics, and I'm not really bothered by the length of the song. Am I the only one who finds some of the more spongy drum patter kind of underwhelming? The playing has moments of complexity, but it lacks punch, which doesn't help the song ever really kick into gear properly with any sort of potent riff, especially with the solo coming in so late with a similar underwhelming tonal choice. I mean, I don't know, I appreciate the novelty of a good prog metal song charting, and it certainly sounds like Tool hasn't lost much of a step, but I gotta be honest, I'm not really wowed here either. It is good, but not really great. Number 90, We Were by Keith Urban.
I am who I am, I just miss who I was when we were.
Okay, why did I think that Keith Urban already had released a song with a similar title to this a few years back? It just strikes that memory for me. I mean, it seemed familiar, but apparently this is the new lead-off single for his next album, with a very welcome writing credit coming from Eric Church. That seemed promising, and yeah, it is, but it's also very blatantly obvious that Eric Church co-wrote this, both in the lyrical cadence, the more detailed word choice, and the faded melancholy coloring the worship of Americana. Now, keep in mind, none of these elements are really flaws. If I was looking for that, I'd point at the knocking percussion that seems kind of stiffer than it should be, and the composition not quite getting the most out of Keith Urban's huge vocal range, but the guitars add a lot of spacious texture, and the writing is very much an Eric Church in his comfort zone, reflecting a lot of wistful yearning for how he was back then, balanced by acceptance of who he is now. He's okay with both. It's nostalgic, but it's tempered in the right way. Maybe a little bit sleepier than I'd overall prefer. I definitely get why Eric Church did not cut this himself, but yeah, this is still pretty decent. I hope it sticks around. I'll take it. Number 85, Club Paradise by Drake.
You think it got to me, I can just read your mind.
Okay, back to Drake with the song from way back in 2011, a promotional song for Take Care that wound up getting cut, likely thanks to that old Bob Marley sample could never get cleared. Also the reason why it's not on this version either. But I absolutely see why this was re-released, because it's a version of Drake that's actually somewhat self-aware and a bit more likable, where the jaded paranoia is still there, but years removed from really stewing in it, as he ponders his remaining connections to women in Toronto and his awkwardness of facing the larger world of hip-hop with his now then current success. And the richer cushion of strings and synth blurred against the subtle tapping beat, it really do capture some of that vintage Take Care vibe, especially with the more low-key hook with the hints of the backing vocals from The Weeknd, which honestly comes together pretty well. So yeah, it's a pretty good tune, and if Drake re-releasing this is a sign he's tapping more into that vibe for his next album, alright, you know what? I'm intrigued. Number 82, Uno by Ambjaay.
Nice and a lot though. Big chop knock a nigga out zapatos. Still getting queso like nachos.
So let's back up a bit. You all remember that terrible Blueface song from a week or so ago? No? Well, okay, apparently it was interpolating this song from another West Coast MC, and at least this guy's on beat. Yeah, this is the sort of song that doesn't give me a lot to say. It's a clunky ass anthem with no defined melody, coasting off a leaden stutter of bass and maracas with a lot of awkward sounding Spanish rhymes. Of course, nachos shows up in the hook. It's also the sort of song where it should surprise nobody that it got big off of TikTok, and yet without much of a tune, it's living or dying by its incredibly basic hook. And honestly, not one I see having a ton of shelf life. But again, knowing my record with songs like this, I'm not even gonna try and predict more here. As it is, not terrible, just sounding more unfinished and kind of mediocre than anything. Next, number 68, Dreams Money Can Buy by Drake.
Don't fuck with me, don't fuck with me.
Now, this is a song I'm not at all surprised that Drake re-released. Another song released in the lead-up of Take Care with the liberal Jai Paul sample. It kind of makes sense in the face of Jai Paul's material now finally getting released properly that Drake would want to ride a similar wave of hype with this, or at least name recognition, especially given how short this song is. And yet I'm not really liking it as much. The Jai Paul sample doesn't quite match with Drake's smoldering flex, and the blur of vocal samples behind him as the shuddering groove slips in, it doesn't quite connect. And Drake spends most of his verses either referencing brand names, saying he's in the top 5 of rappers. Yeah, can't quite sell that now, Drake, you're not in that conversation. And also toying with strippers that he's taken home, and now he wants them to put pants on. In other words, I don't know, it's not bad, but I'm not really wowed by this either, and it does feel like a bit of an odd duck of the Drake songs we got. Next, number 67, Queen of Mean by Sarah Jeffery.
I always thought that I'd be the queen.
So look, I've repeatedly mocked the Disney Descendants franchise whenever songs from it chart on the Hot 100, normally thanks to YouTube. It reads like really bad fan fiction, and the production has a consistent problem of sounding like complete ass, especially if they somehow luck into a decent tune. But I do like a good heel turn song, and Disney at least gets that the villains can be the most compelling parts of their own franchises, so I had to hope this was okay, and wow, are you kidding? You go with underwhelming faux rap verses and primarily acoustic guitars on the hook, with no serious darker minor keys or any sort of distorted textures to ramp up the tension? Hell, I'm not even sure there's any real bombast here, not helped by Sarah Jeffery being utterly unconvincing and selling any sort of credible darkness. Now granted, we're talking about a song called Queen of Mean and lyrics that are cringeworthy and setting up any sort of menace, but if you're building a franchise about villains and anti-heroes and you can't sell anything with real potency or darkness, and keep in mind, I grew up in the Disney Renaissance with the Mob song and Hellfire and Be Prepared that actually took some damn chances. So once again, Disney embarrasses themselves. So yeah, to the surprise of nobody, this sucks. Next, number 61, The Motion by Drake.
I guess that's just emotion.
Okay, 3 more Drake songs, we can do this. Starting off with a cut that actually was a deluxe exclusive from Nothing Was the Same, which kind of seems like cheating, at least to me, especially when there were other loose songs that were ignored, but okay, fine, here we go. And yeah, okay, why was this left on the deluxe again? I can think of a fair few cuts from Nothing Was the Same that could have used the tighter synth groove and the smoky snap that this brings to the table, as well as a hook that was getting a welcome assist from Sampha. I mean, you could have gotten rid of Started From the Bottom and put this on there. And honestly, I kind of dig the content too. Drake with a shrugging flex that highlights he does love this girl, but between that and other rappers needing him more than the other way around, just kind of how it is. Although with Drake piling on the projection of how this girl doesn't need to change who she is, as he wants to save her as she is, it's definitely pushing it for me. Still, you know what? It is one of the better cuts here. I dig this. Number 60, How About Now by Drake.
Cause I'm up right now, and you suck right now.
Okay, another Drake bonus cut added, this time from If You're Reading This It's Too Late, a project I have grown to like a little bit more in recent years, although mostly through comparison to considerably weaker projects he put out in 2016, 2017, and 2018. And that's also mostly somewhat the case for this, mostly because that grainy and ugly Jodeci sample slathered over the lumpy knock of the beat. Now, what this reminds me a lot more of is a proto-Jaded from Scorpion, where Drake steps out of his comfort zone to stand with a girl, probably probably more than he should, and in this case it looks like the song could be linked directly to his old ex, Candace Henry. And then he will then cuss her out when she doesn't show the same interest in him or fall in line, except when he's on the upswing and she wants him back. And it's got the same sort of ugly, sour, condescending note that tends to saturate any Drake songs in this lane. I get being bitter, and there is an audience for a song like this, but the petulant pettiness really kills the vibe for me, even if I do like some of his faster flow here. So while I don't precisely think it's bad, I get the audience. Again, hell, I might even like it more than Jaded. It's not particularly pleasant. Probably let's skip it. Number 58, Trust Issues by Drake.
Trust issues. Oh, trust issues.
And we're ending things off back in the Take Care era with a promo song where Drake is singing a lot more, and I could have sworn I'd heard him croon this particular hook before against the sharper snares and the cymbals and the icy warp of the synths, and that's because it's a flip of the same vocal melody he gave DJ Khaled on I'm On One. Now, to be fair, this is considerably better than that song. Yeah, Drake is getting into his alcohol-induced paranoia, but there's at least some self-awareness to realize on his verse that he does attract the women who would feed into the same vices and vibe that he creates, indulge the same ego he does, would love to switch places with him. It's a good inversion of the scene, and Drake's a better singing here. It's a more naturalistic fit for this sort of production. Hell, if he did more singing like this on his recent albums, I'd probably be more fond of him the past couple of years. But yeah, I'm not sure this is my favorite of the songs that he's recharted or off that last project, but I do like this a fair bit. Good stuff. And finally, number 8, Boyfriend by Ariana Grande and Social House.
Nobody else, and I don't want you to say nobody.
Okay, some context is required here because you might have actually caught snippets of Social House before working with Ariana Grande, even on the Hot 100, but primarily as producers behind the scenes for Thank You Next, Seven Rings, and Good Night and Go. So I didn't precisely have high expectations for this, especially as Ariana seems to have stopped releasing singles from that last album, and that was probably the right attitude, because the only reason you should want to hear this is Ariana's delivery. And even then, why she thinks she sounds good against that overly close, slightly buzzed out sample is baffling. Thank God the thicker bass mostly smothers it before the distorted gang vocals, but it still sounds really cheaply produced and almost off-key. And here's the other problem. Even if I were to buy into the give and take between these guys and Ariana, where nobody seems happy, but they don't want the other person seeing anyone else, even if they're not connected because they just want to keep fucking, it only really works if one of the guys seems like a credible match for her charisma, and between one of them doing his best Khalid impression and not impressing, and the other one rivaling Andrew Taggart for non-charisma, they just aren't even close to being on the same level as her. There's no real balance, and you kinda need it for a song like this. And look, while I might get the melodrama dripping through this song, and Ariana pushes this into being okay, she's absolutely slumming it with cuts like this, especially one on the last damn album, Bad Idea, is sitting right there. I mean, for this, not bad, but there are better singles, and she has put out much better. And that was a pretty long week. Honestly, not a bad week overall, though. Yeah, sure, the worst they follow pretty easily. Queen and Mean from Sarah Jeffery gets the worst by a mile, with What Happens in a Small Town by Brantley, Gilbert, and Lindsay getting the dishonorable mention, but the best is a bit more tricky. I'm not quite sure there's an overall standout, but I know the song I probably enjoyed the most was Love You Too Late by Cole Swindell, and that's getting the best, with Trust Issues by Drake as the honorable mention. Sorry, Tool fans, I have high expectations for that band, and I'm not all that impressed by a 10-minute song that had every opportunity to do more and just can't deliver in the way it really should. Still gonna review the album, but I'm not entirely wowed by that song. Anyway, next time you'll see Billboard Breakdown, it'll be from me while I'm on vacation, so stay tuned for that. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.